Alright, welcome back. This is Cult of Elections, and today we're going to be going over what would happen in the 2020 election if third parties actually mattered. And by actually mattered, I mean, right now each party has about a half split. There are more Democrats than Republicans, but Republicans can clearly still win on a national scale. So we're saying 1/4 for each Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green, and we're doing that based off of the vote counts right now. Might be a garage in the background. Jeez. Okay. So, we're also not going to be doing, tilt, lean, likely, safe margins. It's just going to be safe. That would be a lot to go over. So, I don't exactly have an order to go with these states. So, I'm going to start, I guess, with Alaska and Hawaii. I think Alaska would definitely be Libertarian because right now they have a fairly big Republican base there, but considering it's a rural state, I'd say a lot of people like to keep to themselves there. It would probably be Libertarian. I think Hawaii would be Green, considering a lot of it is packed together, so the exact opposite of Alaska. And I think it's fair to say the Green Party's more liberal than the Democrats. And because of this, and I think it would be close, I think the Greens would actually take California too. Man, this map's looking really weird already. And because of how liberal Seattle and Oregon are, I think it would go the same way there too. But however, differently from this, I think Democrats would take Nevada. And I say that because Nevada's fairly diverse in a way that I don't think they're super liberal. The margin was close in 2016 and 2020. However, I think rural Nevadans, if that's what you want to call them, they would be taking votes for Libertarians, sort of splitting up the Republican Libertarian vote, the right-wing vote. And I don't think it's super liberal, so the Greens wouldn't take that much of a hit there. We can go ahead and categorize a couple of states here. I'd say Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, and North Dakota, pretty rural states. I'm thinking this more in the gun perspective and people keep to themselves sort of thing. So that would all go to the Libertarians. I think Utah would stay Republican because of how religious, how Mormon it is. And that's kind of what I'm going to be basing Republican states. More on religion, maybe on how packed up it is, so not like the rural ones here. I know there's rural Utah, but it's I'd say still Republican. Arizona is an interesting one. I don't think they're extremely liberal either. So I'm going to give that one to the Democrats. And I say that because I think, again, Libertarians and Republicans would split it up, but the Green, who I'm considering to be more liberal than Democrats, would not take enough votes away. And Democrats won Arizona in 2020. Voter fraud aside, we're not going to get into that. Is there voter fraud? Maybe. Who knows? Probably not. Well, there's probably some voter fraud, but in this, we're going based on the numbers that are probably likely to be true. Colorado, I'd say, is swinging more into liberal territory. And I'd say it's getting pretty liberal to the point where it'd be Green as well because of those kinds of margins. I think New Mexico would be Democrat because of more rural areas. I don't think it's super liberal. I mean, I know It may have had a bigger margin in 2020 than Colorado, but I think Republicans and Libertarians would split up their vote there. I guess sort of the Gary Johnson effect. And this one might be kind of weird, but I think Texas would be blue, and I say that because Republicans and Libertarians would split up their vote. And again, I don't think the Green would take a lot of the vote there. Oklahoma, it'd be a close one. Republican, Libertarian, but I'd say Libertarian. And I'd say the same thing for Kansas too. Nebraska's 3rd district, so we're going to go district level here. I think since that is the most rural, I think? Yes, okay. That would go Libertarian. Oddly enough, I think gets closer to being less rural. That goes Republican. And then inner city, I mean, they're not super liberal. The Democrats took it in the first place anyways, so I would give it to Democrats. Now, Nebraska at large. Probably a super tough one, but considering I'm giving District 1 to Republicans, I would consider it Republican. But it would be a really weird one to gauge. Minnesota, not a super liberal state, so that one's for Democrats. Iowa, I would also consider that to be Libertarian, and I'm giving a lot of these states to Libertarians, but I think as we move closer to here, it wouldn't exactly be that close necessarily in terms of like, I don't think many of these other ones would be Libertarian. Actually not giving a lot of them to Republicans, but I'd say just wait on that. I think Missouri would be Democrat because the left-leaning people here aren't exactly super left-leaning to give it to the Green Party. And I think rural, so I'm saying the rural votes would definitely take away from, regular Republican votes. And I think Arkansas would be Libertarian as well. But I think as we get down here in Arkansas, because of how fairly rural it is, I'm saying as we get to like more religious areas, I'm saying these would definitely hold Republican. And yeah, I'm saying West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, just because of how religious they are. They would hold Republican. North Carolina, I can't really see. Actually, Libertarians would split up some of the vote here, so I think it would just barely edge out to Democrats there. Oddly enough, I think Republicans would win Virginia because parts closer to Washington, D.C. Are very liberal, and some parts aren't so liberal, so that would split up the Green and the Democrat vote a bit, giving Virginia there. I think Florida would also stay Republican because it has an older population, which may not be so interested in libertarianism, but rather, they're conservative, maybe some religious views, and very diverse states, so maybe Green and Democrat would split a little bit. I don't think Libertarians would get so much of the vote here. Illinois, very liberal. However, I'd say it would go to the Democrats. And as someone who's from here, I know Democrats have an absolute stronghold on here. I don't think they would let it slip, even to the Greens. So there's that. Indiana, I'd say that's a Libertarian area. There's a lot of rural parts to the state. And I guess that's just sort of how people are. Wisconsin, I'd say, is Democrat in this case. Because, the people aren't so radical. And radical as in, I'd say, green. Not that that's radical by any means. I was just saying that. You could say the same about Michigan and Ohio. Because, pretty diverse states. And I don't think the Green would take a lot, but I think Libertarians would take a lot from Republicans in this way. And Pennsylvania is similar in that regard. However, once we get to places up here, this is more Green territory. Just because of how liberal these areas are. DC, oh, absolutely. New Jersey, Connecticut. Actually, I'm going to take Connecticut off that list. But definitely Rhode Island, Massachusetts for sure. Oh, Vermont, without a doubt. And considering the power of New York City, I would throw the state in green as well. So, I mean, it might be kind of like different. And obviously, I think right now, unless New York's done counting, New York is actually a lot closer of a margin than you would expect. But I think once the votes are done counting and all that, it would probably, lean more Democrat in the real race, at least. New Hampshire is a pretty tough one. But I'd say the Democrats would edge it out because I can't see a lot of Greens actually voting. However, if it was like an even split between these three, 2 right wing, 1 left wing, Democrats would take that one. We'll go back to Connecticut, and I'd say that there's not a lot of Libertarian voters there. And I think the Democrats and the Greens would split hard, causing the state to go Republican. Oddly enough. Definitely oddly enough. That is a weird look. This whole map's weird. But let's finish this up. So, Maine's 2nd district, I think, would go Democrat along with its 1st, because I don't see it being too liberal, and I definitely think the parts of rural Maine would cause Libertarians to go that way. To take away votes from Republicans, and not a lot of liberal thinking up there. So here you have it. Possibly the weirdest colored map that is very hard to read. And obviously in this case, nobody would win. However, Democrats would be in first place with 188 electoral votes. Greens would have 164. Republicans have 130. Libertarians have 56. And this is not because I think there's this many people in the country that think this way. This is based on vote splitting and all that, which would come into electoral college thinking, sort of, I guess. So there you have it. We have rural areas here, Libertarian. We have, I guess you could say, the swing states and all that somewhat go Democrat, which I guess is where a lot of my thinking came from. And then we have the South pretty much, and then certain other areas go Republican, and then green goes to the most liberal areas. This makes sense. I mean, that's kind of how my thinking went through this entire thing. So, what do you think of this prediction? Is it crazy? I don't know. Probably is. Just a little bit of fun. Alright. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.